Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Luke, and I'll be taking you through the ATAR and subject scaling. Just a note before we really dive in, this session is being recorded and we'll send out the, when the recording goes onto our YouTube channel, we'll send you a notification. And also, if you do have any questions, one of my colleagues, Alex, is in the chat and he'll do his best to answer all the questions that come in. Firstly, though, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm running tonight's session and pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. So before we commence, I'll just touch on some key dates. So we're very much in the busy period here at VTAC. We've got the Victorian ATAR and results being released on December 11. That's at 7 a.m. So that is Thursday week. On the following Saturday, so on the 13th at 12 midday, change of preference closes for the big December offer round. So students will have a little over 2 days to finalise their preferences, their course preferences after results are released. So if there are any IB students or parents of IB students joining us tonight, your notional ATAR will be released on the 18th of December, and you'll have a 6-hour window to change your preferences. So that closes at 4 p.m. on that day. Next, we have December 23, 10 a.m. So just a couple of days before Christmas. That's the big December offer round. So December offers will be released by 10 a.m. on that morning, and change of preference will reopen for January round one offers for a short window and close that day at 4 p.m. January round one offers will be released on the 13th. They will be released by 2 p.m. and there will be 3 subsequent offer rounds over late January to mid-February. If we do have any interstate students or parents of interstate students, your change of preference windows will differ according to your results release schedule. So check the VTAC dates page for details. That's just at vtac.edu.au/dates. So we have a few more webinars scheduled for the release period. So we've got getting your results and what happens next. That's a week today on the 9th of December. These are both at 12 midday to sort of more accommodate students, and preferences, pathways and offers Thursday, 11 December at 12 midday. If you can't make it, register anyway. We'll send you a notification when the video hits our YouTube channel, but you can register on our website at vtac.edu.au/events. Okay, so the reason why we're all here, scaling, aggregate, and ATAR. So students' results will be provided to them on the 11th via a joint results program managed by VTAC and the VCAA. Focusing on everything they receive, so their study scores, their scaled study scores, their ATAR, which organisation does what, and what are their responsibilities and differences. So at a high level, VCAA, the Victorian Curriculum and Assessment Authority, are the Victorian state government body that develops and administers the school curriculum, including the VCE. They produce VCE study scores. VTAC, the Victorian Tertiary Admissions Centre, is owned by the Victorian universities, and contrary to a lot of assumptions, we're not actually a government department. We scale study scores after receiving them from VCAA and calculate ATARs for Victorian Year 12 students for the purpose of university selection. So drilling down into what each organisation does, VCAA use a process called statistical moderation. They take all the combinations of internally assessed grades, so school assessed grades, and the externally assessed examination marks and rank them. Then they put them into a statistical moderation process, so they lay them out in a particular distribution. They also manage derived examination scores. So if a student is unable to sit an exam or there's another issue that affects an examination, VCAA can calculate derived scores using other factors such as the GAT and Year 11 results. So when it's all done, a study score is produced. VTAC takes those study scores, which VCAA provide to us, and we scale them, which produces a scaled study score. Why do VCAA use the statistical moderation process? It aligns school assessments. Each school is different and how they conduct their assessments is different. The statistical moderation that VCAA does aligns those school assessments to the same standard, also using the exams that are externally assessed. All students in Victoria sit the same exam for each subject, and that's used as part of the moderation process. So we get the study score from VCAA and we perform a process called scaling. So scaling accounts for the differences in the level of competition between subjects. It's important to point out the distinction. It's about competition and not difficulty, because difficulty is subjective. Some students find chemistry difficult while others will find it easy. Some will excel in physical education or music contemporary performance, and others not so much. So you can't objectively say one subject is harder than another in most cases. But what does change is the cohort of students undertaking each subject. Some are more competitive than others, which scaling addresses. We'll discuss this in much more detail later in the presentation. Going back to statistical moderation, there is an excellent brochure that explains this process, explains it in detail, and that's available on the VCAA website. Just click on assessment in the top navigation bar, then how VCE is assessed, and then on statistical moderation. And you can see a screenshot of the brochure on the screen there. So VCE study scores are produced by VCAA and are based on results of school assessments and examinations. They range between 0 and 50 and show how a student performed in that study relative to all other students doing that same study. So they rank students in each specific study. Scaled study scores are determined by VTAC and range from 0 up to 55. They demonstrate how a student performed in each study relative to all students doing all studies. So they're comparing students across VCE and not just in a specific study. Scaled study scores are used only for the calculation of an ATAR. So if you're doing course research and a course has a English prerequisite of say 25, they're referring to the VCE study score or the raw study score as it's sometimes referred to. As I said, we'll return to scaled study scores a bit later on in the presentation. Okay, so moving on to the ATAR. What is it? Well, ATAR stands for Australian Tertiary Admissions Rank. So it is a rank and not a score. It ranks a Year 12's achievement compared to their age group in a given year and is nationally equivalent. This means that an ATAR of, say, 65 will apply as is across the country. So students can apply anywhere in the country with their ATAR, and it will remain as is in all other states. So if a Queensland student with an ATAR of 65 applies through us in Victoria, we won't tinker with their ATAR at all. We'll just accept that 65 and apply that as is. It is a tool for tertiary selection based on relative performance in the VCE. It's calculated solely for use by institutions for tertiary admissions. So it's there to get students into a course. It has no other function. It allows tertiary courses to make fair comparisons between students who have completed different combinations of senior secondary subjects and reported as a figure between 0 and 99.95 in increments of 0.05. Why do institutions use the ATAR? Because most courses will receive more applicants than they have spaces, so they need a way to rank their applicants. ATAR allows courses to make offers based purely on academic merit efficiently, transparently, and without any sort of bias or arbitrary decision-making. So who receives an ATAR? VTAC will calculate an ATAR for all VCE students who have successfully completed the VCE, achieved study scores in at least 4 permissible Unit 3 and 4 VCE studies, including one from the English group. We'll also calculate notional ATARs. So notional ATARs are those calculated out of the usual circumstance for VCE students. So mainly Victorian students who have qualified for the International Baccalaureate, have completed at least one Unit 3 and 4 study outside of a January to December timetable. So an example of that is the VCE has been offered in China. I believe it's been discontinued. So, well, I could be wrong, but that's on a Northern Hemisphere timetable. So those students will receive a notional ATAR. If we've had to incorporate interstate studies within the ATAR, then that person gets a notional ATAR or have previous Victorian Year 12 results other than the VCE. So could be someone who did the old Victorian HSC many years ago. If they enroll in a VCE Year 11 and Unit 3 and 4 subject, we're then able to calculate an ATAR for them, assuming they meet all other criteria. Okay, so how is it calculated? There are 3 stages to the calculation of the ATAR. We've got scaling, aggregate, then the ATAR. So we'll begin with, and also return to, scaling. Why is it necessary to scale subjects? So the first thing about scaling, it's got nothing to do with how hard or how easy we think subjects are. It's about the competition within each subject. So what does that mean? Well, before we go into the hows and whys of scaling, we need to briefly return to and discuss and further clarify VCE study scores. So what we need to understand about VCE study scores is that they're not scores, they are rankings or relative positions. They're reported as a figure between 0 and 50, and 30 is always the average. So if a student achieves a study score of 30 in, say, chemistry, they have performed better than 50% of the chemistry cohort in that year. So our student sitting in the middle of that curve on the screen is there because when the whole cohort's results are put in order, they sit exactly in the middle, regardless of their specific exam results or assignment marks. So because each study score measures achievement in each VCE subject alone, and each subject is undertaken by a different cohort of students. For example, the cohort of students undertaking physics this year is different from the one doing literature, which is different to the group of students doing economics, which is different to those studying drama. The level of competition to achieve that middle rank or study score of 30 differs across each subject, not because of an inherent difficulty in the subject, but because of who is undertaking it. So it means that you can be of equal strength in 2 subjects and receive different study scores for them. So let me put it this way using a sporting analogy. It's going to be easier for me to place middle in the Victorian final of the 100-metre sprint than it will for me to place middle in the 100-metre sprint at the Olympics. Both are run over the same distance, have the same rules, but the only thing that really changes is the cohort of athletes. One is much more competitive than the other. So what scaling does, it accounts for the differing level of competition between studies and gives us a result as if every VCE student had done the same subject. The purpose is to ensure that a scaled study score of 30 is equivalent to a scaled study score of 30 in every other study. How do we do it? So we'll use chemistry, we'll keep using chemistry as an example. We look at all of the VCE chemistry students and undertake an average of their performance in all of the studies that they undertook, including chemistry. Where that average is higher than 30, scaling goes up because it tells us that they are a more competitive cohort and that it was harder to be average in that subject for that year. If the average of all their studies was, say, 28, scaling would go down. So scaling is not about the subject's curriculum or perceived level of difficulty. It's purely a mathematical process about the level of competition. It's applied using results from across the state and is not about individuals or schools. So the scaling process is conducted each year for every VCE subjects, and no outcomes are predetermined. So maths and languages are treated a little differently when it comes to subject scaling. So looking at maths first, mathematics first, while difficulty across the spectrum of VCE subjects can be subjective, a person who excels at science may struggle in graphic design, or a person passionate about history or politics may struggle with drama or music composition. There is a clear hierarchy of difficulty across the 4 maths subjects. So while scaling normally considers competition, we scale the 4 maths studies against each other as well as being scaled against all other studies, and will use the higher result. This ensures that students undertaking the more difficult studies aren't disadvantaged by that level of difficulty. Now, with languages, in an effort to increase the number of students learning another language, these subjects received a bonus. I think it was introduced by the Kennett government, I believe, in the mid-1990s. So it's a +5 to the scaled mean, and it's already included in the published scaling report. So I'll stress that it's a +5 to the scale mean and not 5 points added to the ATAR. Because it's added to the scaled mean, it decreases the further you get away from 30. So what if there was no scaling? Well, there'd be no consistency across subjects. As we've discussed, because study scores are rankings within a particular subject, they're not equivalent. You can be of equal strength in 2 subjects and receive 2 different study scores, depending on that student cohort. This can lead to selection decisions by tertiary institutions, by universities, and then making assumptions about certain subjects. So they're making an assumption that this subject is harder, so this student has had to apply themselves harder, and then making selection decisions or making decisions to extend an offer based on those assumptions. So with scaling, we have consistency. A 30 in one is the same as 30 in another. 2 students with the same ATAR are treated the same way, and no arbitrary decisions are made about their application. Okay, so to summarize, scaling is a purely mathematical process about the level of competition within a subject. It has nothing to do with perceived difficulty or subject content, but about who else is doing the subject. It's applied across the state, and it's not about individuals or schools. The process is conducted fresh each year, and while you can probably see patterns each year, there are usually a few surprises so no outcomes are predetermined. A student's study score is scaled in the year in which it was achieved, even if that is not the same year that they qualified for an ATAR. So if anyone attending this evening completed a subject last year in year 11, and then it was scaled last year, and we won't make any changes to it. If you want to see how each subject is scaled, the scaling report is published each year with the results release and is available on the VTAC reports page at vtac.edu.au/reports. We also have a video that explains scaling visually and in understandable language. You may find it useful when revisiting scaling around the results release or after, and it's available on the VTAC YouTube channel. And it goes through pretty much everything I've just spoken about in about 3.5 to 4 minutes. Okay, so now on to the aggregate. So the aggregate is the next stage in the calculation of the ATAR. The aggregate is the total of all eligible subject contributions to the ATAR. So we add up the primary 4, including the English subject, and any increments, and that figure is the student's aggregate. To be eligible for an aggregate and therefore an ATAR, a student must successfully complete the VCE, so at least 16 units, and complete at least 4 subjects, including one from the English group. So here we have an example of an ATAR calculation. It's a real one from a couple of years ago. So at the top is the compulsory English subject that is embedded at the top, regardless of scaled study score, because it is compulsory. The English subject is compulsory. Then we have the remaining permissible 3 subjects. They're listed in descending order of scaled study score. So we can see towards the bottom right of the table that this person's aggregate, the sum of all their subject contributions, is 136.17. In terms of the subjects used and their order, we will automatically use the best combination possible. There are some restrictions on what can be used in the aggregate and therefore an ATAR. So need at least 1 English group subject in the primary 4. A maximum of 2 subjects from the same group can be used in the primary 4. So for example, it could be 2 maths subjects. A maximum of 3 subjects from the same group can be used overall. So if if a student has done 3 maths, 2 will go into the primary 4, and the third will go as an increment. So these groupings are detailed in the ATAR and scaling guide on the VTAC website. And there's also a fact sheet. So we've got a screenshot of it on the right, and that can be accessed at vtac.edu.au/fact sheets. So there are students that have completed various VET subjects. These can be used in the ATAR calculation or can be used in the aggregate. So scored VCE VET can be used anywhere in the ATAR and is treated exactly like all other scored studies. Unscored VCE VET can only contribute as an increment, so 10% of the 4th subject. If the unscored subject leads to a higher ATAR, it can be used ahead of another scored subject within those increments. I'll note now that we'll only use unscored VCE VET subjects where there is no scored assessment available. So if somebody is doing a scored VCE VET and then chooses not to take the final examination, then we won't use it. We then have VE3 studies, formerly known as VFE, and they're those that are not part of the VCE VET program, but have been approved for block credit. So we're talking about your various certificates at McDonald's and such. These can be used if there are fewer than 6 VCE or VCE vet studies available. But an official VCE subject or VCE vet will always take precedence over block credit. Okay, there are two other types of increments available. The first is university extension studies, which have to be approved by VCAA. So this is if a student undertakes a university subject as part of their VCE. It's a fixed value between 3 and 5 based on a percentage results in the study. A maximum of one of these extension studies can be used. Interstate studies are treated as block credit by default, so 10% increment if provided to us. If there is a student who wants to use an interstate study, they'll need to speak to their careers practitioner because there's a form that needs to be filled in to use. Okay, so we've scaled subjects, we've added up the subject contributions. Now the ATAR is produced. So we've got all our aggregates, they're arranged in order. It says 210 there, but some years they go over 210. Aggregates are arranged in order with bands of maximum students around 39 to 40 at the top and decreasing as the ATARs get lower. The maximum will always be 99.95 and not 100. This is because the ATAR is a percentile ranking that ranks students against everyone in the Year 12 age group. A student's ATAR represents the percentage of people they performed higher than. Therefore, it's statistically impossible for the students with the highest result to perform better than themselves. So the ATAR is a band. It's not one aggregate value applying to one ATAR value. It's a range of values. So in this example, we can see that an aggregate range of, say, 196.02 to 198.79 corresponds to an ATAR of 99.50. So this table, this aggregate to ATAR table, is published each year with the results and is available at vtac.edu.au/reports. Or you can go to the VTAC website, go to reports and statistics and navigate to the aggregate to ATAR table. So if you're if you've got a younger brother or sister, or if you've got a younger child, it can be handy for showing the potential impact of taking up an extra VCE subject. We've got a few other examples of snapshots on our website. These are case studies of people who have done Year 12 subjects over multiple years, whether they did subjects they enjoyed and were good at, or if most of their subjects were scaled down. These are available on the ATAR and scaling guide on the VTAC website. Okay, so how are students going to receive their results next week? So results will be provided via a joint effort between VTAC and VCAA. We run this each year. They'll be available online at resultsanATAR.vic.edu.au and via a joint results app. To access their results, students will first need to register a secure password at resultsanATAR.vic.edu.au, which is a pretty straightforward process. It should only take them a few minutes. For reasons that I hope are obvious, we encourage all students to register before the 11th, so not to wait until 6:58 a.m. on the morning of the 11th to register their password. So do set it in advance of the results date so they can just log in on the 11th and get their results without any hassle. As part of the results delivery, we established the post-results and ATAR service, which is staffed by VCAA and VTAC members. It's a phone and email inquiry service set up to assist students with questions about the VCE results. and ATAR. The service will be available during the times on screen for 5 days following the results release. So paid VTAC applicants will receive their official ATAR statement digitally. Hard copies won't be posted. They'll receive an email registration request to create a MyEquals account. So within the MyEquals portal, they can access their official statement. So MyEquals is the portal all Australian universities use to provide official transcripts. If you've got a child or you're looking after someone who has decided not to apply for courses this year but are in year 12, that they can order and pay for a hard copy ATAR statement via the VTAC website. The registration link for VCE students will be sent on the 16th of December and for International Baccalaureate Notional ATARs on the 19th. So we have a range of resources available. I've mentioned the VTAC ATAR and Scaling Guide. You can access that via our website, so vtac.edu.au/ATAR. We have a range of fact sheets available, including one that goes through the various subject groupings and scaling and such. So they're all a free download. Just go to vtac.edu.au/fact sheets. And lastly, our contact options. So phone during business hours. On the morning of the results release, so on the 11th, our contact centre will be open from 7 a.m. and will be open on the following Saturday during the change of preference period. I'm sorry, the hours escape me. It's for a few hours. It's all detailed on our website. And that's it for the presentation. I hope you found tonight's session useful. We've just had the one person on the chat tonight, so I hope he's managed to answer all of your questions. If he has not got around to your questions, please don't hesitate to get in contact. You can give us a call and one of our staff be happy to field your questions, or you can email through our website, or if you're a VTAC applicant, through your VTAC account. So as I said, this session will be recorded and we'll notify you when it goes up onto our YouTube channel. So thank you very much. Enjoy your night.